I don't know what stage everybody is at in the audience in terms of their SDR journey, but certainly cold calling is an incredibly important piece of anybody's repertoire. Probably, I'm sure there's a lot of people in the audience that this is what they're doing all day, every day. And so let's, knowing the theory on it is going to be super important. So I'll kick us off if you don't mind, Morgan, and
Absolutely,
then
go ahead.
we'll do a bit of like table tennis on this. But let's start off with a do. All right. So first thing that I say to every single SDR, and one of the most important things you'll ever hear is all around mirroring. Mirroring is replicating the tonality and the style in which your prospect is, speaking and acting, in order so that we can, I suppose, engage with them in the best possible way. Everybody does this naturally. I usually speak to my team about their grandma voice versus their friend voice. You go around to grandma's. Mine's 89, actually turned 89 this week. And when I go around, I put on my kind of cute, like, "Hey, Nan, how you doing? Like, hope you're enjoying your cake" type voice, right? And realistically, when I'm speaking to my friends, I'm probably a lot more colloquial, a lot more direct. And I do that. That's purely mirroring, and it's completely natural. Something that I'm sure everybody's doing all day, every day. But it's really about creating that engagement with the prospect. So if I jump on a call and someone says they're really busy, I'm not going to slow down my voice. I'm going to speed it up, right? To recognize and that they've said they're busy and try and like really focus on that. So that'd be the kind of like one of my first and major points is recognizing as early as possible the tone and the way in which like our prospect is speaking, and really try and mirror that as much as possible. So yeah, Morgan, do you want to pick one up?
Absolutely. So and to compliment on that, it actually goes into the closed questions, right? Because I want to talk about the don'ts, because this actually goes with the mirroring, right? So when you are mirroring somebody, to David's point, you have to make sure that you make them feel comfortable with you. What doesn't make people feel comfortable is when you interrogate them. This is why this is right next to the mirroring piece, because you can't just ask people closed-ended questions, because they're going to start feeling uncomfortable and then they won't open up, which is why you want to ask open-ended questions. So one of the things that I feel like most people may have faced this before, if you're an SDR and you're in sales, I know this, I faced this before, is when you cold call someone and then just say no, yes, maybe, and you're like, this is going absolutely nowhere. So you have to figure out what are questions that I can ask to open up the conversation. So what I want everyone to do here is, if you are facing that same obstacle I just suggested, go write down what are the questions I can start asking that are more open-ended. Typically, those questions start with how, what, when. Those are ways you can start having better conversations with the prospects you're talking to. So closed questions, I wouldn't say it's an absolute, like, don't ask closed questions, but for the majority of the cold calls you have, you need to be thinking about, how can I open up the conversation, because this person is not looking to talk to you at all. And that's what we have to come into the mindset of, like, this person, you're calling them out the blue, they're not prepared for it, so you ask questions to show them that you know them a little bit, so they open up, and that's how it leads to better conversations.
That's
I'm
awesome.
happy to pick up the next one. I'm going to focus on the don't, just because this is something I did when I started, and it was something that once I changed, really changed my kind of SDRing. So initially it's really tough. You're getting into cold calling, you're trying to balance the script, you're trying to understand what you're selling, and you're also trying to like actively listen to the prospect. So what I would find myself doing is really just speaking about whatever I was selling. And this is the easiest way that you will lose your prospect's attention. All you want to do is ask those questions that Morgan was saying, those hows, whats, that are really going to allow them to open up, because you need to remember that you are there to find a pain and to provide a solution. Not every cold call is going to be, one that you can solve, but ultimately you want to ask those open-ended questions that will then allow you to mention those product features to kind of solve those pain points. So try and speak less about what you offer and really just, I guess, put the ball in their court and let them open up. And if there's a pain point, you can then solve that.
That's awesome, guys. Just really quickly on these points, like what are we seeing as like some of the go-to questions to really open people up? Is there anything that you kind of, maybe Morgan, just from speaking to so many different organizations with so many different scripts, is there anything that kind of like is a go-to yeah, so that we're not bombarding them with product features.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that I'll say to everyone is that you have to decide what the best questions are for you. You're gonna have to actually do the work to find the best ones. I'm gonna give you some go-to ones, but the thing is, what I'm gonna give you is not contextualized, right? Because in each organization, they reach out to different people, they care about different things, and so you have to actually take the time to be like, okay, what do these people actually care about? How can I phrase questions this way to get better responses? So that's like the first thing I want to say. But questions that you can ask is say, hey, to what extent is this important to you, right? You could ask that type of question. Or you could be like, hey, could you quickly elaborate a little bit more on what you said? That's a good question that you can ask as well. So the thing is, the questions are all going to be predicated on what people care about and their challenges and priorities. It's hard to give an exact question without knowing what is happening in that business. But to use questions that are like high level, you could say, hey, to what extent is this important? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Can you expand on that point? As you see what I'm doing here, I'm layering down on what's being said to ask better questions based on what they have there. But in order to open someone up, you have to know about them, and that requires research before you even get on the phone about these personas so you can speak the same language as them.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Awesome. All right, let's move on to the next point. This is a do, which is, an example. Well, so one thing that you see from the top performers time and time again is their ability to disarm people on the cold call as quickly as possible. I can speak for people internally to Cognism. You can do it in a number of different ways, but one of the easiest ways, and it's something that kind of has to come naturally to people at times, is like a really good icebreaker that can make people laugh, right? So you've hopefully heard a million times, how many polar bears does it take to break the ice? I'm sure some people in the audience have used it at a bar a fair few times on somewhere they're interested in, but really you want to think about like do I have any way of disarming prospects? We had an Australian guy, he's called Brad, shout out Brad, who used to be an SDR at Cognism, and his opening line to every single person was, hey, I know this is a cold call, you can hang up on me right now if you'd like, right? And straight away, super disarming, made people laugh. Now, other people in our organization tried that exact same line and it didn't work for them. So it's really important that you do something that is natural to you. But yeah, if you see an or if you see something on someone's LinkedIn, or and you think that you can kind of make them laugh or whatever, just some way of disarming our prospects as early as possible, don't be afraid to throw that in. All right. I think for the 1 in 10 times that it doesn't work, the 9 in 10 times that it does work, it can be super, super powerful. So yeah, that would be a key point for me. Morgan, do you want to move on to the next?
Absolutely. So, I really like what you talked about the icebreaker. One thing that we call them is pattern interrupts. Every single person here should have a pattern interrupt across the board, right? So make sure that you're focused on that. Let's talk about the product features. I like so value vomit. I don't know. I like to call it value vomit on this one because this can happen a lot, right? A lot of people will just be like, let me just talk about all the things that I'm about. So just don't do this one. And one of the best things that you can do, right, to make sure that you add value to everyone is think about them first. Always think about what's in it for them. And every single cold call, it's like, okay, what can I say here that's going to be relevant to this individual? And like really think about that. Because then when you lead with that person, it changes it. So an example, you could be like, hey, the reason for my call is we've been working with people like yourself, and these are things that we've been helping them with. Or, yeah, we've been assisting organizations within your space, and these are the things that we've helped them with. So when you change it to about them and then product, it changes it versus we're the leading provider or we're the best in the world. Like nobody cares. So you have to switch that up to be like, what is it in it for them? Okay, we've been working with people in your space, great. Or hey, we've been helping people like yourself, and this is what we're seeing, great. I'll add one tip here, and then we'll bounce to the next point. This is a word that if you use this as an SDR, use this as a sales rep, you will book more meetings. I can guarantee this. So the word is typically. Now, why? You use the word typically because you want people to feel comfortable that you've done this before with other people. And naturally, most people don't want to break the rules and they want to follow what everyone else is doing. So because of that, if you use the word typically, it's as if you've done this 1,000 times, which you probably have if you're necessarily calling a lot of people. So if you start off the call saying, hey, the reason for my call is typically when I talk to directors of sales, we've been working with them on how to increase their pipeline and how we do that. And then you go into your product. Say, hey, how we do that is we give them training, we have a product, we have a data tool, whatever that may be. If you focus on using the word typically more, you'll start noticing that people are going to be more drawn into you and you're going to have more engaging conversations because they're going to be like, you've done this before. When you come off as like, we're the leading provider, we're amazing, we're on the 50th quadrant of whatever, Gartner, like nobody cares about those things. So then they're just like, it is what it is, versus changing it to be like, it's about them and how I can serve them across the board. So that's kind of like in tune with the value piece. But that's one thing I want everyone to pay attention to here is don't lead with product, don't dump on people, don't value vomit. Come with a reason, say, hey, typically this is what I'm seeing. It makes you come off as a trusted advisor and a subject matter expert to the people you're talking to.
Sure, it's social proofing, right? That word typically
Yep.
as well. It's you know,
Absolutely.
if they're feeling it, but you're saying other people are feeling it, then you know it's creating that like empathy across the board. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, John T, when we were brainstorming this, you wanted to throw in there that a concept of don't lie, which you know, salespeople sometimes have a reputation for. So do you want to quickly comment on that at all?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to say I've found myself in this position before, but when prospects ask you a question and you know there's not going to be everything you know about your product, the best thing to do is just to be honest. Like sales is about transparency for me, and it's really just about saying, look, I'm going to be completely honest with you here. I don't actually know the answer to that question. I'm more than happy to find the answer out and get back to you. This, I guess, builds trust, which is extremely important, and kind of loops into just the thing about commission breath above. And this is something as a salesman you don't want to find yourself doing. You know, come the end of the month, I've been there, you need one more meeting to book. You now just start kind of pushing the prospect. And this loops back to building that trust. You want them to feel comfortable into agreeing to wanting to learn more or showing interest into your offering. So never lie, be honest, just say, hey, look, I'll be honest, don't know the answer to this. More than happy to find it out and I can come back to you. That way, you know, you're always on the right foot with the prospect. And I think just moving forward, they're going to feel more comfortable opening up to you and I guess engaging in more communication further down the line.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, Morgan, do you have?
No, I was just gonna agree. It's like I don't know if anybody in the chat wants to put like a one real quick. I'm just actually curious. Anybody in the chat like you're 4 month like one you just started or to 4 months in your role, like you're brand new to being an SDR. Anybody in here like just put a one? I'm just curious because like this is a game changer. I want to see if anyone is in here like brand new, like new to SDR world. This is a new for you across the board. Well, if someone is, or obviously you're hiring people, this will happen. One of the key elements is like using that what John T said, if you're especially if you're new, to be like, hey, like I don't know the answer. However, I know someone who knows the answer. My account executive. Let's schedule up a 30-minute meeting with the account executive. Like when I was new, I used it all the time. You schedule a lot of meetings because you don't know, right? You're like, hey, look, I don't know that answer at all. And you have to compliment them, right? That's a great question. I wrote it down. Let's schedule a meeting with the account executive on that one. I just want to give that tip out there for some brand new people. Like you should be using that all day long because I don't know if David or Jonty's happened to you. I know it's happened to me. I'd like 2 months in, I tried to make something up and I got destroyed by the executive. He's like, yeah, that makes no sense. And that's not right. And I was like, oh, okay. Let me never do that again.
I did door to door for 2.5 years, and 2.5 years after I started, I was still saying that it was my first day to certain people, right? Like which I know goes against John T's point of not lying, but really helped me get out of certain situations by just saying, hey, let me get back to you on these kind of things.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
absolutely.
more. Shout out to some of our new starters to the SDR world. Natalie Bond, Diego Souza, Jonathan Spencer, Ujjal Rahman, and Harshit Gupta. So apologies for the pronunciation, but yeah, like shout out to you guys. Feel free to reach out to all of us if you have any more questions. Okay. So let's just moving on, because I know I'm conscious of time. I did want to shout about a couple of some of the key things I teach new starters, which can really kind of give you some early success. Firstly, my concept of a 3 no's rule. I think you get told to objection handle, right? Like everybody you call, you have to remember you're interrupting their day, and you're going to get pushback on everything you're saying. So I build in to our onboarding plan this concept of a 3 no's rule. It's a good general rule of thumb of like, you've got to push through 3 no's before you hang up the phone, right? You've got to try and push through 3 objections. I also find it really important when people are in a rut. So if there are any SDRs out there that are in a rut and they're wondering why, the most common thing that I see is people are looking for low-hanging fruits. They're imagining in their head a world where you pick up the phone, you give your pitch, and then people say yes straight away without thinking. Whereas when you're really confident, you really naturally just push through those objections. So having this 3 no's concept, a 3 no's rule, really allows you to stay consistent on pushing through those objections, which is sometimes really tough, especially when you're new, or as I say, when you're in a rut. So that'd be something that I'd work on. And then I'm really big on an assumptive close. So when it, one thing that I see again often in new starters, but it can kind of creep into like, it can be a bad habit that other SDRs have as well, is they get to the end of the call, they've got the prospect excited, and they say, okay, so would you like a demonstration of our product? Now that question is it's 50-50 at that point. If you've got someone at that stage that's on the fence about whether they want to take a demonstration or not, generally speaking, if they're truly on the fence, and you ask, would you like a demonstration, they're going to say no. And the reason is because humans always take the path of least resistance. Okay, and in that situation, and when they're truly 50-50, they're more likely to say no than to say yes. So what we do, and what I teach, is to kind of skip that step and ask a question like, so do you have your calendar in front of you? Right now, everybody has their calendar in front of you, and then those 50-50 people, they're more likely to say yes, and then in doing so, they've essentially accepted the demonstration. So really try and focus on, and your requirements in terms of that next step as a sales development rep will change across the board, but really think about, how can I do it how can I make my close more assumptive, and therefore like just increase my chances of a positive result from it.
I absolutely love that. The 3 no's is key. That even flows right into, I know we're going to get into the live piece here. 3 no's is what I tell people all the time as well. We're heavily aligned on that, and it leads right into like the objections, right? It's like ignoring prospect objections and just not saying anything, because it's very easy to even hear an objection and then just hang up, right? You're just like, I don't even want to do this right now, right? It's very simple to do that, when you have to go with the 3 no's. And what I tell people when it comes to objections is, you to really embrace the no's and then figure out what to say and do active listening, is you have to pause. So when you get an objection, this is for everyone, I'd write this down, like take like 1 to 1.5 seconds and just pause. This is going to feel like eternity for most people. You're going to be like, I don't know about this, right? Like it's not going to be right exactly how you want it to be, right? Because it's going to be uncomfortable. But the whole thing, right, is you want to be able to pause and then handle it. So someone just threw an objection in the chat. Let's just do this live, right? If someone's like, hey, I don't have time right now, I'm going into a meeting. Let me tell y'all the real thing here. When someone says that, most likely it's probably not true. There are instances where it could be true, but most likely it's not true, because like, why would you pick up the phone if you're going into a meeting? Like, I probably am not going to be doing that, right? If I'm busy, why would I pick up the phone? Like, just think about how people answer certain things and they don't make sense. Like, if you don't have time, you wouldn't pick it up, right? So one of the best things you can do, even I saw this on Not Interested, I'd be curious to hear other people's thoughts before we go into this exercise, but when anyone says at the beginning of the call, not interested, I don't have time for this, I'm heading into a meeting, I don't really care what they say, this is all you have to say to them, and they will allow you to have this time to schedule the meeting. I'd be like, hey, Yeah, can completely understand that you're busy right now. However, all I'm asking for is 30 seconds of your time. And in that 30 seconds, I'll explain to you what we do over here at JB Sales. And if that's relevant in any way, we could put time on the calendar to call you when you're prepared for it. Or if not, you can hang up on me. Does that sound fair? And the reason that works is because every single person that answers the phone has at least 30 seconds to talk to you. Otherwise, they would have not picked up the phone. Also, you notice at the end, I said, does that sound fair? No one wants to be unfair. So most people say that's fair. That's fine. If I can get my value prop done within 30 seconds, should be 20 seconds, and they agreed to it, guess what? I just booked the meeting and I didn't have to deal with any further objections. So if you're struggling with, hey, I'm heading to a meeting, I'm not interested, I don't want to talk to you, you need to just take a pause and then say what I just said. That's how you handle that.
I really love that, Morgan. I think it goes back into this point of being disarming when you first start your call. Like there's nothing
Yep.
like I think SDRs can tend to be really combative in that situation and kind of be like, why? Like what, why you're not busy? But actually kind of just calling on fairness and also appreciating the fact that I agree with you, Morgan. Like they're clearly not that busy, otherwise they wouldn't have picked up the phone. Still recognizing that they are probably busy people and they probably don't want you to be there, but all you're asking for is 30 seconds. I think is extremely disarming in that situation. So that's really great.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. And please keep throwing these objections. We're seeing them coming through on the chat, and we'll try and get around to all of them when we can as well. Okay, and then Jonty, I don't know whether there's any more that you want to pick up that we haven't covered already.
No, I think that's pretty much covers a lot of really good tips and tricks, and then things really to eliminate. I think an important thing is not always to focus like on the do's, but to really just eliminate the don'ts, and that will help you a lot, like just in the cold calling. So yeah, I think that's really that's all for me.
Okay, great. I'm thinking maybe just quickly, because there is only 2 more at the moment, we just talk through some of these other objections, because I suppose that early objection handling is something that we've been focusing on. So Morgan, I don't know whether you just want to I'm just trying to find it here, but just the early ones of not interested. Is this a sales call? Like I think Sandy
we could
put
go
that
into
in the chat. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's see so not interested, there's context around not interested, right? So if you got it at the beginning of the call, because some people, you're going to say, hi, my name is, and they're going to say not interested. Now, our first instinct is to say, not interested in what? I didn't say anything yet. So, right? Like nothing happened, right? But you don't want to say that. It's not going to work. You're going to say what I just said earlier, right? Now, if they say not interested after your value prop, then first and foremost, you probably need to evaluate what your value prop was, because if you're getting not interested a lot, that means what you're saying isn't clicking, right? Then this is what you have to do, is you have to pivot and you have to bucket them, is what we call it. So if someone says, hey, I'm not interested in that, you could be like, hey, like, sounds like this might not be one of the priorities right now. I know that the most important thing when I call people is timing. Typically, when I talk to a VP of sales, they deal with these 3 things, X, Y, and Z. Is that currently on your radar, or am I just completely missing the mark here? So what I'm doing is showing them that, like, I have this piece of the value prop, right? That part didn't work. But as you all know, there's multiple different ways that a product can serve somebody. So what I need to do is figure out, okay, he's not, or she not interested in that. There's other things that they probably could be interested in that I offer. So I'm going to bucket them on things that I feel like that typically they could be dealing with. If they tell me, yeah, it's one of those things, then I could insert a new value prop based on what they're now interested in. So that's how you handle that objection. Now, let's go to the other one is this a sales call? Now, this one's interesting. Everyone handles these things differently. This is how typically I handle it. I'll say, hey, this actually is not a sales call. The reason for this call is to see if you're interested in getting on a sales call. So look, I know I'm calling out the blue and you're probably not comfortable with taking cold calls at all. I completely understand that. All I'm asking for here is 30 seconds of your time, nothing too crazy, just to quickly explain what I believe might be able to help you in your organization based on what I've done research on. And if that's not interesting to you, it's okay to tell me no and we can part ways. Does that sound fair? So you notice I pivot back to the 30 seconds, but I still address this as a sales call. Because ultimately, it's not an organized sales call. This is just me calling to see if there's interest to actually get on the call. So those are typically the ways that I handle those objections.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think there's one more objection that was thrown in the chat earlier. Let's just quickly address that one, because I think it calls on one of the points we haven't raised on this do's and don'ts page. Philip raised, we already have a similar product in place. Now, I'm sure, that's a whole webinar in itself. It's talking just about how to handle competitors, right? But really, that's a competitor question. One of my don'ts was don't forget your tonality immediately after receiving an objection. It would be really easy and to straight away be like, oh, and that can kind of be the instant response. My immediate response to anybody that says that is perfect. Okay, like every single time, I want to find out all about their vendor that they're using currently. Hopefully I've learned my battle cards really well, and I know how to and I know I have really good knowledge of the space, and I know how to combat everything. But one thing that we talk about a lot in Cognism is the concept of don't call anybody's baby ugly, right? If they've got another vendor and they are enjoying it, the last thing I want to do is be like really combative around it and kind of get into an argument. So I'm going to say perfect. One thing a lot of kind of new SDRs struggle with is when they do say how good their vendor is, and that vendor is a competitor of yours. A question that we've been using recently to insane success is simply asking the questions, okay, and on a scale of 1 to 10, like how would you rate your current vendor? A lot of the time, or 90% of the time in that situation, they will say 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, and then you simply ask the question, okay, what would make it a 10? And now you're working out the pains that they might have with that current vendor that you can hopefully like really address and fix. So yeah, learn your battle cards, be super positive when people say that they've got another vendor, so you're already winning that, and again disarming our prospect. But certainly that question for anybody that is struggling with people that are enjoying their current vendor has been really, really useful for us. Morgan, I don't know whether you want to quickly comment on that one at all.
Yeah, I'll quickly chime in. So there's two things you can do. One is you can use a scale of 1 to 10. That's a really good one. Another thing that you can do is ask them like, oh, good to, like you could say, like Dave said, hey, good to hear you're using them. We've heard them before. Out of curiosity, and I used out of curiosity before I ask questions, so it doesn't feel like I'm being interrogative. I'm just a curious person, and everybody likes a curious person because we're curious human beings. So I'll be like, hey, out of curiosity, are you married to that solution? So it changes it, right? Are you married to that solution? You can like something, it could be cool, but are you married to the solution? Then it changes the conversation, because now they're like, no, we're not married to it. Then it's like, okay, so why? Now I can dig deeper, right? The other thing is I will go back to what I said, like. So I also want them to expand. So I'll be like, okay, cool, you're losing that solution. What do you like about it? Now, this is interesting if you use this. Not all the time, but some people, when someone says they're using something, it also means that they may not like it. I may have something, but I may not like it. So I could be like, hey, what do you like about this? And some people may be like, oh yeah, we have it, but I don't like it. Right? They may not have been part of the decision-making process. Maybe they weren't involved. They're like, yeah, I don't really like this product. That just changed the entire conversation, right? But let's say if they like it, it gets them to open up. It gets them to be excited, like we were just talking about. And then instead of saying, hey, like, what is it? What sucks about this? You ask someone, how would you like to improve on this, right? Improvements, people always want to improve. So I ask, how would you like to see this improved? So then they give me the answers, and then I can take those answers and move from there. So 2 additional things to what's been said here, but if you use one of the 3 things we talked about, you should be able to handle that objection.